SECOG may sound technical and confusing, but knowledge can sometimes give you an edge in the competition. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So on July 27th, 2017, the YGO organization posted an article in regards to changes regarding the SEGOC, otherwise known as simultaneous effects go on chain. This is really big because this is something that's kind of created a chasm between the OCG and the TCG in regards to the way certain card effects function and the way certain things are ruled. But now that's no longer the case, and I'm really happy that we're going to have these changes. So what I want to do is I want to read the snippet from the YGO organization in regards to the new rule changes, and then we're going to cover in depth exactly what this means and how this can benefit you. So the new rule states, when multiple cards are activated simultaneously, if effects of spell speed 1 cards like trigger effects are activated at the same time, they will be resolved in a special chain. This chain is made by starting with the turn player's mandatory effects. If there is only one effect, that will be chain link 1. If there are 2 or more effects, the turn player builds the chain starting with their mandatory effects in any order, then the opponent continues the chain with their mandatory effects in any order, afterwards the turn player adds their optional effects in any order, and finally the opponent adds their optional effects in any order. So this is kind of a mouthful, so let's break this down piece by piece. So first off, let's kind of, discern the difference between a mandatory effect and an optional effect. A mandatory effect, pretty fucking self-explanatory, is an effect that if the trigger requirement is met, you must resolve the effect. So this is a card, for example, like Baby Sarasaurus. Baby Sarasaurus reads, if it's destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, special summon a dinosaur. Now, this is not optional, so if you don't have dinosaurs in your deck, you still have to search and attempt to activate the effect, and if you don't have anything, you actually have to show your opponent that you don't have any targets. Some other examples would be something like White Stone of Legend. You have to search for a Blue Eyes if White Stone of Legend goes to the graveyard. Now, compare this to an optional effect. An optional effect is something very simply like Zodiac Rapier. Zodiac Rapier reads, on normal summon, you can send 1 Zodiac card from your deck to the graveyard. Those 2 little words, you can, pretty much are the big distinguishing difference between a mandatory effect and an optional effect. And that actually makes a really big difference in the terms of way cards can sequence, in terms of the way their effects can be activated, and the way certain cards interact with one another. So basically, what does this boil down to with these new rule changes? Well, the biggest thing is that now it doesn't matter how or when your cards kind of hit the graveyard or when they meet their trigger requirements, more specifically, in terms of how you're building your chains. Let me give you guys a couple of examples. If you remember in the not too distant past, Burning Abyss was a deck that actually had a lot of chain links because of the way there was so much milling and the way certain cards hit the graveyard, a lot of different applications like that. One of the biggest things was if you had a Burning Abyss monster, let's say Graph, underneath your Dante, and you use the effect of Dante to detach the Graph and mill 3 cards. Now let's say on that mill, you hit something like a Seer and let's say a Farfa. Under the old TCG rules, Graph actually had to be chain link 1 because of the fact that it technically met its trigger requirement first by hitting the graveyard before the Seer and the Farfa did. And then subsequently, the Seer and the Farfa could be stacked in any chain order you would like, but the Graph, no matter what, had to be chain link 1. Now this is completely foreign to people in the OCG because in the OCG, they were allowed to stack those 3 monsters in any chain order they liked. They could have made Graph fucking chain link 3 for all they cared. But ultimately, this is an example of what's going to change now. So if you're playing something like Burning Abyss, God help you because it's link format, this is pretty much something now that you can do. Another example would be Shadal's Rest in Peace construct. So with Shadal's, if you use something like Shadal Fusion or El Shadal Fusion, and you sent, let's say, Shadal Skomata and Shadal Hedgehog to the graveyard, and you would summon, or actually, let's say, Shadal Skomata and let's say just some other light monster. Then you would summon out your El Shaddoll construct. Well, the thing is, because Squamata hit the graveyard before El Shaddoll construct hit the board, Squamata would actually have to be Chain Link 1 and El Shaddoll construct would have to be Chain Link 2. El Shaddoll construct pretty much always had to be at the tail end of the chain because all the monsters that hit the graveyard for its summoning condition pretty much had to resolve first because they met their trigger requirement before El Shaddoll construct hit the board, meeting its requirement when it's summoned. Now, again, this is a huge change because now if Shaddolls, were still meta relevant in any way, shape, or form, you could, in theory, make Shaddoll Construct Chain Link 1 and then make your your Shaddoll Squamata Chain Link 2 or any of the other monsters that you sent for the Shaddoll Fusion's activation requirements. You could make Shaddoll Construct Chain Link 1 and that's absolutely huge. Another really big example, and this was actually just last year in Monarch format, Monarchs had this issue where if you tribute summoned an Aether for Edea, what would happen was Edea would be forced to be Chain Link 1 in this instance. Aether would be Chain Link 2, but the problem with this is, if you made Aether Chain Link 2 in this instance and you summoned out Kuraz the Light Monarch, because Kuraz the Light Monarch is a when this card is summoned effect, and Edea was still Chain Link 1, Kuraz would actually miss the timing because of the fact that there was still the chain resolving, and because Kuraz has a when instead of an if, you wouldn't get the opportunity to activate Kuraz, pop cards, and draw cards as a result of this. So this kind of gave Monarch players, some really annoying times because they had to decide between activating the effect of Edea when it hits the graveyard to bring a card back to their hand, or using their Kuraz to pop cards and draw cards when they should have realistically had both at their disposal. So now it's cool because the chains can be built differently. They can have Aether as Chain Link 1, they can make Edea Chain Link 2 so that they can get both Edea's effect as well as the Kuraz pops in a separate chain after that resolves. So, and then a more modern example would be something like Wind Witch Ice Spell and Glass Spell. So Ice Spell, when it's special summoned, you get to bring out a Glass Spell, and then Glass Spell, pretty much before, Ice Spell and Glass Spell would have to be a specific chain order, but because now of the new rules, you don't have to worry about that whatsoever. You can make them whatever chain order you want. So, ultimately, I've thrown a couple of examples at you guys, but what's really the big deal? Why do we really care about, the way these chain links work, or what impact does this really have on me? Well, what's really cool now about this is that we can actually take advantage of, kind of a coined term called chain blocking. And chain blocking is kind of something we also saw in Monarch format, but it's mostly used against specific types of cards that are used to interrupt our plays, most notoriously Solemn Strike. So one of the biggest things back in Monarch format was if you had a return of the Monarchs on the field, anytime you tribute summon for one of your Monarch monsters, because both the Monarch monster and return would trigger at the same time, you could build the chain in whichever order you saw fit. And ideally, you were gonna make the effect of the Monarch Chain Link 1 and return of the Monarch's Chain Link 2. And the reason you did this is because it allowed you to dodge and play around Solemn Strike, since Solemn Strike has to be used in direct correlation to the activation of a specific monster that's using its effect. And since Return of the Monarchs was actually the last thing in the chain to be activated, the opposing player could not use Solemn Strike to disrupt the Aether or the Erebus or whatever Monarch card they had, meaning that the effect could go through and they didn't have to worry about Solemn Strike. Now, I love little interactions like this, but now that we have the SEGOC coming out of Japan, this is absolutely amazing because now we can take advantage of chain blocking even more than before. In the instance of Monarchs, it was kind of built into the way the Monarchs functioned, but now if you play a deck that has multiple cards that trigger at multiple instances, you can use and build your chains in specific ways to protect your most valuable effects so that, you know, sure, something else could get Solemn Striked, but you can ensure that that one card you really want to resolve is going to go through, and there's nothing your opponent is going to be able to do about it. I really think that this is very valuable information, especially if you play a deck that really has these chains come up often, and it's definitely something that you're going to want to study up on, just depending on whatever deck that you're going to play in the future. You know, this actually boosts Trick Stars tremendously, because a lot of people were worried that because of the way the Trick Stars function, that it was going to have, you know, a very different effect here in the TCG than the OCG, because the OCG could build their chains in whichever order they desired. But now, since we're going to have that exact same ruling, it actually gives that deck, you know, a whole new, you know, just a whole new light, because now it's going to be used in the way it was meant to be used, rather than being restricted by the way certain cards hit their trigger requirements at the same time. It was really fucking stupid, and I'm just really glad that we finally got this here in the TCG. But guys, let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the new rulings and changes to the SEGOC, or simultaneously effects go on chain. I think this is a long time coming, and I'm really happy that we finally got this, because this is absolutely huge. And looking forward into the future, I'm really hoping that we start taking all of the OCG's rulings and applying them here in the TCG, because I think it is so fucking asinine that we have different rulings and different ways that cards function in different countries. It's one card game. It should have universal rulings. I understand that Japan has cards that are, you know, a few months ahead in advance, but frankly, for all the cards that we already have at our disposal, all the cards should function in the exact same way no matter where you're playing the game, because the game's already complicated enough, and the fact that you have different cards functioning in different ways in different countries is absolutely fucking stupid. But guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you really found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.